Natalie, thank you for your submission. We've got you for 10 minutes this afternoon, so I'll hand over to you.
Tēnā koutou, e te kumoti, ko Natalie Coates aho. I am currently ko-tūmaki of Te Hungaroa Māori, but my learned colleague will be making a submission on behalf of Te Hungaroa Māori on Thursday. I am here to talk to my personal submission that I made as a descendant of Ngāti Awa, of Mā Tātua Wakawhānui, of Ngāti Hine, of those rangatira that signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and as a lawyer, barrister, who happens to have some knowledge of how Te Tiriti intersects with law. So there are a couple of points in my submission that I wanted to emphasise. I apologise for any repetition. I've been unable to watch all of the submissions this morning, so not sure what's already been covered. So the Waitangi Tribunal has said that if the bill were enacted, it would be the worst, most comprehensive breach of Te Tiriti in modern times. That's not an exaggeration. This bill violently strikes at the heart and soul of Te Tiriti, our foundational constitutional document. It's one party to the treaty, the Crown, reimagining it, Te Tiriti, in a completely novel way that strips out the primary guarantees and the promises to Māori, the other party to Te Tiriti. You cannot get any more bad faith than that. I think one of the worst parts of this bill is that it's akin to a taniwha telling you that it is wearing the korowai of Te Tiriti on its back. It draws on certain elements and words of Te Tiriti, but twists and recasts them in a manner that ultimately bears little resemblance to the original promises and the guarantees that were made to Māori. The use of the structure of Te Tiriti and fragments of its language is a cunning way to masquerade Te Tiriti and attempt to legitimate a redefinition endeavour. However, those proposed principles are but a warped shadow of Te Tiriti itself. The rangatiratanga of rangatira and hapu are gone. The full exclusive and undisturbed proprietary rights that Māori were guaranteed as long as they wished to retain them are gone. Beyond general citizenship rights, the only remnant Māori rights that survive these principles are those confined to treaty settlements. Treaty settlements were not designed to codify the Crown's treaty obligations going forward. If iwi had known that, they would never have signed up to them. Treaty settlements, where Māori settle for often less than 1% of the value that was taken from them, are an expression of aroha and grace by Māori to Aotearoa, with a view to moving forward from an ugly past into the future with a more treaty-consistent Crown, as usually promised in those treaty settlements. They do not and were never intended to embody the full treaty relationship going forward. This bill flies in the face of them whilst purporting to try and recognise them, and in doing so will create a legal conundrum and confusion. It also breaches the very intent of what underlies treaty settlements. One of the examples of the trickery or sleight of hand being played in this bill is the clause that says the proposed principles do not alter or amend the treaty itself. That provides no comfort. Sure, we do not have anyone going down to the archives and doing a track change version to our original document, but whenever Te Tiriti is legally relevant in the law, those incorrect principles that are amputated from Te Tiriti itself will replace Te Tiriti. So whilst it says it's a non-altering clause, it amounts to a full legally sanctioned rewrite of the Treaty of Waitangi. A few final points. This bill would also shake the foundations of legal certainty in our country. It would result in obliterating 40 years of jurisprudence and require relitigation across all areas of law where Te Tiriti is relevant. What is proposed here strays into territory beyond what is constitutionally appropriate behaviour by the executive and by Parliament. It's seeking to turn a fiction into legal fact. The bill does not contain a legitimate interpretation of Te Tiriti, nor reflect what an honourable Crown, particularly one that is a party to Te Tiriti, should be doing. What I would encourage people to think about, given some of the rhetoric surrounding this particular debate, is how our democracy can be read consistently with the recognition of Indigenous rights in our founding constitutional document. This is not about special rights for Māori. It's about the recognition of pre-existing rights and the arrival of a new people in power in town and how we can coexist. Democracy can be about us choosing to be a country that honours our history, our foundations, whilst also acknowledging the importance of equality, like we already do through the Bill of Rights Act. There are many countries that do this. Canada, for one, has treaty rights being upheld in their written constitution. Te Tiriti is a beautiful and inclusive document that has a place for us all, and we deserve a healthy constitutional debate around these matters, not one that casts shadows, creates confusion, and embeds misunderstanding and mistrust within the general public and Māori, or that stokes dissent and division. That is what this process has done. I urge the Select Committee to recommend that the bill be abandoned, and that the government continue to work with Māori to honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Natalie, thank you. We've got a number of questions. I'll take them in order as Ginny, then Debbie, then Tamitha, and then I'll circle back to Duncan. Sorry, Duncan.
Kia ora, Natalie, thank you for coming along. I appreciate having your expertise here today. One of the things we've heard today is that an argument that judges shouldn't be part of making these decisions, the courts don't have a role with democracy. Democracy should sit with Parliament and politicians. And there's a common misperception in the general public that that's not part of our democracy. That's quite a big thing to try and explain and have a big debate about publicly. Do you have any insights how we get around that difficulty?
Yeah, I think one of the dangers that we've seen arising over the past year or two has been the undermining of the judiciary. Like, the judiciary is one of the key prongs in the separation of powers, and actually you need a public that trusts the judiciary for power to work in Aotearoa in general. And so undercutting what it's doing, which is legitimately interpreting the case before it and the law before it, which refers to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, is a really unhelpful thing for our democracy in general. It undermines our democracy and its very functioning, and actually a healthy judiciary that does its job separate from Parliament and the executive is key.
Thanks, Natalie. We've got Debbie and then Tam.
Thank you, Chair. Atina Benelli, it's great to hear your submission. In your submission, you spoke about this bill a step backwards, knocking the treaty into a static, outdated framework, and mentioned iwi settlements in the aroha to the nation, their desire for peace. In your experience, relitigating and the risk that this does, and relitigating not only current settlements but historical settlements, and having a government that ignores Indigenous rights in Aotearoa, what does that look like? What does that look like, particularly for you in your sphere of industry and influence?
Well, what this bill would do would obliterate 40 years of jurisprudence that's built up around this particular subject matter. And so Te Tiriti o Waitangi, as you know, is pepper-potted across a whole range of different pieces of legislation and is relevant across all areas of law that are relevant to Māori, which is most areas of law. What this do would require relitigation of what this all means. Because on the one hand, it's saying let's uphold treaty settlements, what that recognise an ongoing relationship in accordance with Te Tiriti, whilst also saying here's how you define them. Like, it would just create this extremely uncertain legal landscape that would need to navigate for a long time.
Thanks, Natalie. Next is Tam Paul and then Duncan if we have time.
Kia ora. What do you think about the way that Sir Apirana Ngata's interpretation of the treaty has been used throughout this whole debate over the last year at least?
So to be careful of answering this, Ta Apirana Ngata was of course a great man and a great rangatira and a great statesman in Aotearoa, but that doesn't mean his views on the treaty are correct. And I think what needs to happen is that, I think what's happened is that his words have been taken out of context and weaponized in a way that I think is terrible, actually, and it doesn't honor him as a person either. So it needs to be seen in context, right? So he was writing and made those comments at a particular time in our history where Te Tiriti o Waitangi had been right roundly dishonoured. It needs to be taken in light of how he saw te ara mō Māori, e hari ana ki mua, tōringa ki ngā, ko tōringa ki ngā rākau a te Pākehā, ko tō ngākau ki o taonga a o tipuna. He had a particular vision for Aotearoa, but also it needs to be taken in light of the overwhelming amount of work that has been done since that time by historians, by academics, by an independent commission of inquiry, by lawyers, by interpreters,
Thanks,
etc.
Natalie. Sorry to interrupt. We're at the end of the time for the session. So just on behalf of the committee, acknowledge you being with us to present and for spending your time with us this afternoon.
Okay, get to the commentary. Good luck, start.
Oh, that was a good submission. I actually been speaking to a lot of people that have been speaking privately, and they really enjoyed their experience with the submission. With the submissions, in terms of the submission itself, I thought it was a really good submission in terms of, knocking out all the criticism around and tying up the criticism around the different interpretations. I thought that was really good, especially in her answers.
Yeah, I found the logic of her presentation from a first principles point of view, as well as from a legal and constitutional point of view, to be very strong. I was thinking while I was listening to her, it's a shame that we don't ever, and we're never going to have the opportunity for a legitimate and substantive exchange around the strength of arguments that actually are available and are being presented. It's a real shame. People are having their say, and the case that has been assembled, certainly from my perspective, unsurprisingly on the side of rejecting the treaty bill, has been extraordinarily strong. I mostly just felt, damn, I'd love to hear somebody try to shoot down the quality of Natalie's arguments.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and I mean, I've sat there and I've watched comments of the ones we've already sat there and posted on there. There's a lot of misinformation, and it's sad that racism drives viewership and comments.
Yeah, look, if I could just double down on that. So I would go so far as to say that if there was a conversation opened up with a sample of New Zealanders in respect of their understanding of the treaty, its historical context and its meaning, I would suggest that, particularly in certain age groups, but I would suggest it would be very, very low. And the misrepresentation of the whole debate as one about equality and about race is so disingenuous and destructive. It's intentional. It's intentional because that's, let's be frank, ACTA really pursuing this for political capital. There's no other game in town in respect of what they're here to do. And but it's just so disappointing that on something so fundamental and important to our values, namely truth and fairness, and justice, that that political leaders and others are so willing to deceive and misrepresent rather than just let's have an honest conversation on its merits. Very disappointing.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to say, Stacey, since I know you've been behind camera, in front of the camera, all over the place?
I have literally been here all day.
I know. I got to the bank into the Basin Noodle House, and I think Craig Rennie brought food from the Basin Noodle House tonight.
Oh, nice.
yeah.
You know, I was just going to say, Natalie made some really good arguments in her submission, and I was actually talking to Ray while I was off camera in the last hour, and he was saying that he loves the way that this is allowing people to pass on the kaupapa and pass on the kōrero one after another and just keep the conversation going. If we get to see so many, as well as getting to see the horrible racists and etc., we also get to see so many well articulated and well researched and well delivered submissions not in favour of this bill that are waking the entire motu up to this conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, The Order Paper Podcast. YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, The Order Paper Podcast.